Welcome back everybody. We are cooking together again today some beautiful pita or burek or gibanitsa. I never know what to call it, but we're making pumpkin and feta. And yes, if you want to cook with me, let's get ready. So don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Pop your apron on. Let's get started. I'll be using my KitchenAid mixer for today. If you don't have a KitchenAid, any mixer will do, or you can do it by hand, but it'll take longer. We always wash our hands, and I wash my KitchenAid bowl first, because I have a cat and I don't trust that cat not to go on the counter, which is where I keep my mixer. So we wash our bowl, and we're going to be using the dough hook today for our cooking. So if you have that ready to go, you can go and get your ingredients. We are going to be using very basic ingredients for today's pastry. It's plain flour, we'll use a little bit of salt, some olive oil, and we'll be using some water as well. If you need the measurements for everything, just look in the description box if you're watching on YouTube, or you can check the blog at beautifulyorganised.com as well, and I'll have everything listed there for you. I'll be fighting with my salt container a little to get that salt out. What's new? I do that every time, but we're going to push through and keep going. Okay, so we're mixing the flour and the salt together, and then we're going to add some warm water, and then once that water is there, we want to add our olive oil. I'm going to put my dough hook down for this part and then measure in my oil, and then I'm going to start mixing everything on a really slow speed. And the reason I start slow is because I don't want it to splash the flour outside of the bowl. Okay, it's time to turn that up just a little bit faster. I tend to go on about 4 for my speed. Tapping the bowl there also helps that extra flour to get incorporated in as the dough hook is doing its kneading. Now the beautiful thing about this dough hook and the KitchenAid is that it will clean the bowl for you as it kneads your dough. Now mine is almost ready. I'm going to add a little bit of extra flour because it's sticking right down the bottom, which is causing like what looks like a little tornado or a cyclone effect. So adding more flour means that that stops sticking at the bottom of the bowl and starts to come together, more of a ball-shaped dough instead. So I'm going to turn my KitchenAid off now, take the dough off the dough hook. It's nice and warm and it's still a little bit sticky, so I'm going to knead it by hand in a minute. But first I'm going to rinse that dough hook off so that it's easier to clean later when I wash the dishes. So we want to add a little bit more flour and knead it all by hand. The consistency I'm looking for here is kind of a warm, stretchy Play-Doh, but I want it to be stretchy, not sticky and gooey. So once you've got that sort of consistency, then we're going to rest it. This is what it's going to look like. I'll show you here the consistency I'm looking for. See, when I stretch it out like that, it doesn't pull apart, but it's not particularly sticky either. You want to add a little bit of oil to the palm of your hand and then kind of cover the outside of the dough ball. You don't have to knead it in, but kind of massage it on the outside. That's just going to stop that ball of dough from sticking to your bowl while you rest it. And I'm going to rest mine just on the countertop. I put a tea towel over the top of the bowl, and then I go away and I enjoy my life for an hour. You can take a bath or read a book, whatever you want. It's been an hour now and I'm back. I have a dinner plate on the counter with me. That's going to be my guideline for how big I want to roll out this pastry. And after a little bit of kneading by hand with a bit of extra flour, I'm dividing mine into 6 pieces. If you have a really big table and a clean tablecloth, you can make this really big and stretch out the dough the whole of the table size and then make one really big pastry and go from there, but I don't have room for that, so I'm making 6 small portions and I'm going to bake them all on one tray together at the end. So basically what I do is I cut up and I portion my pieces, I add a little bit of extra flour to the outside, and then I start to roll it out into a rough circle with my rolling pin, and I want to aim for it to be the same size as that dinner plate on the counter, because each piece now, as I roll it out flat and thin, I'm going to then rest it on the plate in layers with olive oil in between each layer. Now it does take a while to do your rolling, but don't panic. What I want you to do now is focus on slowing down and enjoying the process. You don't have to use just a rolling pin if you don't want to. I like to roll my pastry out with a rolling pin, but you can also pick it up by hand and stretch it out bit by bit. kind of like they do with pizza dough, but this is more delicate, so you have to be really careful. If you're going to try and stretch it with your hands, just kind of pull at the edges a little here and there and toss it around. You do want to make sure you're not getting any holes in it. I'm not very good at that, so I tend to stick with the rolling pin method for the rest of my pieces here. Now before I put the first piece of pastry on that plate to rest, I need to paint it over using olive oil and my pastry brush. It just means that it's not going to stick to the plate while it's resting and while I'm working on the other layers. You want to pick up your pastry as carefully as possible. Try not to get any tears in the middle of it so that it's all just one big piece, and then lay it down on the dinner plate so that it's ready and waiting for when you want to add your filling. Time for some oil on top of this piece, and once that's covered, I can get started on the next one. Now you'll see me do the exact same thing 5 more times, so in the interest of saving a little time, I think we'll speed it up from here. Now that all 6 pieces are done, we'll move on to our next step. I have a bowl full of grated raw pumpkin and a bowl full of crumbled feta, and that's going to be the filling for inside our pita. So we take the first layer, back on the board, and all you need to do now is take a small handful of the raw pumpkin and a small handful of the feta and sprinkle it on the pastry. It doesn't have to completely cover it. What you'll need to do is think about how many portions you need for each piece of pastry. So my bowl of pumpkin and my bowl of feta, I need to get 6 pastries worth out of that. So it doesn't need to cover the whole pastry. You can just scatter it on top. Next we want to roll the sides. You want to do this really slow and gentle. We're trying really hard not to make any holes or spill out any of the topping. I like to fold the ends in. It makes it a little bit easier. You can do whatever you feel. Once you have it all rolled up together, then you just need to check that you've got the edges sealed, and then we're going to take the end and wrap the rest around it into a little scroll shape or a little circle. This part reminds me of making a snail shell. Onto the tray. I've sprayed that tray with some canola oil spray so that it doesn't stick when it cooks. Once your first scroll pastry roll is on there, then you're going to move on to your next layer, and we'll do the exact same thing 5 more times. Just one more step now before we put them in the oven. I want to take a little bit more oil now and brush it over the top of each one of my pita scrolls, just to add a little bit of extra texture to the top. And then once that's done, they're ready to go into the oven. It's into a 190 degrees Celsius oven for 35 to 45 minutes, and then you're done. They are beautiful, they are delicious. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you have, and comment below if you're going to give these a try. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!